Riley here again from the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club, and I've been doing some little videos about some of the accessories on my F800GS. I've had quite a few people ask me what things I've added, and I've done one on the side stand foot, the crash bars, and a few other pieces, the front sprocket cover, but I thought I'd just do one to talk about some of the little parts that maybe aren't worthy of having their own video, but are still pretty useful on the F800. So let's go over to the bike and take a look. Okay, here we see the Fenda Extenda. This one is made by Pyramid Plastics. There's a few other companies that make them now. One of them is Machine Art Moto, which makes a really nice one. You know, it just keeps a lot of the crap from being thrown back onto the bike. I actually prefer the Machine Art Moto one because it doesn't taper to a point. If you look at this one, you can see that it kind of tapers to a point, so you're not getting a lot of coverage. The Machine Art Moto one stays wider down here and I think does a better job, but when I bought this, this was the only game in town, and I think it does a really good job of keeping a lot of that debris from being thrown back on the engine. Okay, here we see the shifter. This is an aftermarket shifter. I believe this one is made by Touratech, and the big thing about this one is that it has a folding tip. And basically, if you don't have a folding tip like on the stock shifter, anytime you hit something, it's just driving all of that force right into your transmission spline here, your shaft, your spline shaft that goes into your transmission, which isn't nice. The other nice thing about the folding tip is that if you fall, especially if you're moving forward, this will tend to fold instead of being forced into the engine case. And a lot of people on a lot of different bikes have punched holes in their engine cases by having the shifter whack into the side of the case there. Here you can see I've got some aftermarket foot pegs. These ones are made by Rock Stampa, and as far as I know, they no longer manufacture anymore. I think they went bankrupt. But there's a lot of different companies that make similar pegs. Suburban Machinery, I think, Fastway. The thing to take away here is this nice wide peg makes it much more comfortable to stand on. The other thing is these pins grip amazing, and I was totally, you know, blown away by what a difference in terms of controlling the bike it made to have these. Because if your feet aren't connected to the bike, especially if you're standing, it's really hard to maintain control. And once I got these and I went on my first off-road ride, I was kind of blown away by what a big difference it made. It wasn't just a comfort issue, but I found it actually was quite a big control improvement. Now I do have an aftermarket exhaust. This is a Remus, and I bought it cheap on the net because it had this dent in it, and it makes the bike sound better. I never noticed a big performance increase. I think you do tend to want to rev the bike more because the bike sounds a lot better, and if I hadn't been able to buy it cheap, I don't think I would have bothered buying it, but I managed to pick one up, and looks nice and sounds good. Now, I've already talked about the Moto Overland side stand foot extender, so I have a video on that already, but I will just say that if you don't have one of these and you go off-road, it's pretty frustrating when every time you stop, your bike sinks into the ground and falls over. So get some sort of side stand enlarger. Now, this is the Moto Overland rear rack, and I did speak about this in my side stand foot video, and basically very adjustable. You can slide the rack front to rear here. Easy to take the rack off by lining up the screws with these keyholes. You can mount a Rotopax fuel can on here. You can mount a GV. You can mount a lot of other different luggage. Tons of strapping points to tie stuff down. Very solid, and made by the good guys at Moto Overland, who are just nice guys. Now here we see the SW Motech side racks. Now I bought these side racks when I first got the bike, and these are the quick lock removable ones, where basically you can stick a coin in here and turn this, and if you unlock it here, 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 and here, you can easily take the rack off. Now when I first got these racks, I was quite concerned that that was going to be a weak point, and I was kind of thinking of taking these out and just replacing them with a bolt, which you could do if you're worried about somebody stealing them. The only thing I don't like about this rack is these little pointy things. You can see here I've fallen and it's left a little divot. Some of them were quite close to touching the bodywork, and I actually ground them down a bit to give a little space. But I have fallen on these many times, and they really help protect the tank and bodywork, because otherwise this would be what would be hitting the ground. So I bought them and I've left them on, and they've taken a lot of abuse. They make a very handy point also for other people to help you lift the bike. And on the other side, you can see that when I had a crash on asphalt last year, they helped keep all this bodywork and everything off the ground, and kept the bike from really being damaged. So these are the SW Motech. They're very nicely made. And while we're here, we can see I have one of those tractor tube, plastic tubes that you can find from many vendors on the web. I think, you know, they're cheap. This one here, I don't put my heavy tools in it because I wasn't quite sure how much abuse this would take before these mounting points cracked, but I keep all kinds of zip ties and tape and wire and a bunch of other stuff in here, and basically you've just got a big screw cap that keeps everything nice and watertight. So certainly if you've got a spot to stash one of these tool tubes, that's not a bad idea as well. Now here we see this beautiful aluminum machined piece of kit, which replaced the stock plastic one that came from the factory. This is made by a fellow in Germany, and if you look at my other videos you can see a complete install review of this. And it's not that the stock plastic one doesn't work, but this is just much nicer in the sense that when you do get a bunch of gunk and muck in here, it's a lot easier to clean the stuff out. Well, I found with the plastic one, which is solid, you know, stuff would build up in there, and the only way to really clean it out would be to take it off. This one here, you can actually get in here and clean that stuff out. Now here you can see these are the BMW Hand Guards, and I think this little spoiler on top is actually an extra. Now when I bought these, there was not a huge selection of hand guards on the market, so I bought the BMW ones and I thought I would replace them with something else, but they've worked so well and they've stood up to so much abuse that I can't really see the point of getting rid of these to put something else on. I think if I was going to go out and buy some today, I probably wouldn't buy these. I think there's better options for the money, like Highway Dirt Bikes makes a product, or just the regular Bark Busters or somebody else's. But the BMW ones do work. You know, this was from the same crash that scuffed up a lot of the rest of the bike, and they kept the levers safe. And since we're here, we might as well talk about the levers. These are the Pazzo levers, which are shorty levers, and they're adjustable for reach. They're just nice. They're just nice and beautiful. They're quite expensive. I don't know if I'd buy them again. I do like the fact that they're shorter, so there's less chance of them hitting the ground in a fall. There's a lot of Chinese knockoffs of these on the internet now that are ridiculously cheap, and I know a few people who've bought them and they seem to work fine. The big difference with the Chinese ones seems to be that the anodizing is very low quality and tends to fade in the sun, but they're really just, I think these are really a little bit more bling than functional, but I like them. Here we see the Headlight Guard. I believe this is the Touratech guard. You know, other than the total poser look, which is nice, I do ride behind guys on other big bikes quite often, and when you're following Chris, let's say, on his HP2, you can tend to get a lot of stuff being thrown at you. You don't want to break your headlight on one of these bikes because it's quite expensive. And this one is not easily removable, but it has enough space so you can get in there to clean your headlight. There's lots of options. It's not a bad idea in terms of roost. If I was just driving on the road, I don't think I'd bother with it. Here you can see my Scott's steering damper. This has actually made quite a big difference. I find You know, we do a lot of rocky trails here, and I find with this, you know, you crank up the damping, and in loose sand it really helps, and it also helps in rocky terrain. You know, you're driving along with that front tire, and when you hit a rock, instead of being deflected and then you have to do a big correction and all of a sudden you're flying all over the place, this really keeps that front tire going straighter, and it absorbs a lot of those big jolts to the handlebars, so these big jolts when you hit things aren't being transferred to the rider. So I find it much less fatiguing to ride with this as well. This is part of the Scott system, these risers, and since I needed to raise the handlebars to make this bike fit me anyways, this turned out to be a really nice package. Installation, pretty easy. The only big deal is there's a little bit of plastic here you have to trim to get it to fit, and you need a special high security socket to remove the ignition, and when you buy the kit from Scott's, everything's supplied to get it done. The thing that more people have asked about has been these mirrors. These are the Doube Take mirrors. It's some space age plastic that just does not break. Even if you manage to shatter the glass is easily replaceable. They sell replacements. And the mirror uses the RAM system. RAM, the RAM system. And I love the RAM system. I use it for my GPS. I use it for my GPS antenna. I use it for my spot messenger, which you can see here. The RAM system is great. You know, basically every device and where you're mounting it to has a ball connected by an arm. There's one knob on the arm you loosen. When you loosen it, you can adjust the device, and when you tighten it, it stays in position. So the nice thing with these Doube Take mirrors is when you fall down, the mirror can still move without breaking, and if you want to, you can go on the trail and you can loosen it. I keep these quite tight. And you can fold the mirrors out of the way. So it's a nice system, and then when you get back on the road, you can put it in position and tighten it. You can also use different length ram arms if you want to get the mirrors a little farther out so you can see more behind you. You can easily do that. Or if you're like me, you can kind of use a medium one, and I find I can still see past my shoulders. Really good rear visibility in a nice flexible system that survives falling down. Another thing I've done on this bike is added some BMW plugs, some BMW accessory plugs. This is the factory plug, which is plugged into the bike's CAN bus system, so it will shut off after a minute or so once the ignition key is shut off, which isn't very useful if you want to pump up a tire or do something else. So I've installed a second plug here that goes directly to the battery. You'll notice when you take this plastic piece off, there's already a shape on the bottom of this that helps you to drill the hole in the perfect spot. So this is wired directly to the battery with a fuse. Now, this is great for some accessories, but it's not very convenient for others. I use this to plug in my GPS, and it works fine for that. But for an electric vest, it's not very convenient to have the wire running down the tank. So I installed a second plug here. There's lots of room behind here for the wiring, and this is protected from my knees when I'm riding, but the crash bar keeps them safe. And this is the one I would use when plugging in my electric clothing. Now here we are looking at the bike from the right hand side. Here's my rear tire, and this is the fender liner made by Mudsling. And before I had this, my poor rear shock, I would come back from a ride and you could barely see the shock. It was just packed with mud and dirt, and it was just getting pelted with debris. So I wasn't expecting a very long life out of this shock. On some bikes like an 1150GS, at least you get a little rubber flap here to protect the shock. The 800 came with nothing. So when this product came out by Mudsling, I bought one. It mounts to some screws under the fenders and then attaches here and on the other side with a zip tie. And very solid. You know, fits in between the rear tire and the swing arm, and you can come back from a very mucky ride and your rear shock and the rest of the bike up here won't be packed with mud. Since this product came out, I think Mayer and a few other companies actually make competitive products. I don't have any experience with them, but one thing's for sure, something back here to protect the shock is going to be better than nothing. So I think this is one of the more expensive ones, but it works. Since we're still up near the handlebars, I thought I'd talk about this. This is the Spot Messenger. A lot of people have asked me what that orange thing on my handlebar is, and this is kind of a tracking device and emergency beacon in one. So once it's on, it has a GPS, it knows where you are, it can transmit every few minutes your location to a website. So if you authorize someone, they can go to that website and see where you are and track you, which is kind of useful if you want to have someone back home kind of know where you are. If you don't want to use that feature, you can just leave it on so that it knows where you are, and then if you get into trouble, you can lift this protective cover and hit the emergency button. When you hit that button, this device will send via satellite an alert that you are in serious trouble, and the central command station kind of where it receives the message will then know where you are and contact the local authorities and send help. Now if you don't need emergency help but you just need regular help, you can actually hit a button where some pre-arranged people on a list will get a notification. So if I hit this button, a bunch of people I know will receive an email and a text message saying, basically, I'm not dead and I'm not in dire straits, but this is where I am, can you please come and help me? And then of course, if it was a more serious event, I would hit the emergency button and then the cavalry comes running. You also have another button here called OK, which basically allows you to just tell everyone you're okay. So when I was traveling in Costa Rica, when I first got this device, at the end of every night, I would hit this button and my wife back in Montreal would get a message saying, I'm okay. And then she knew I'd stopped for the night and everything was good. Now the other thing a lot of people have asked about is what GPS I use. This is a now ancient Garmin GPS Map 276C. This has to be 10 years old. I'm not sure how old it is. Still works. The little antenna that used to be up here stopped working, so now I use an external antenna. Since I've started using that external antenna, the reception is a lot better. I really like this GPS because it's not a touchscreen. So I can actually, just by feel, use the buttons, zoom in, and start navigating, and I don't have to keep looking at the screen, because with a touch screen, you know, it's pretty hard to know where you are. Well, with these buttons you have a tactile feedback. So I'm going to keep using my old 276 until it finally dies. Now here you can see my windshield. This is actually the stock windshield. I had used a taller windshield, and I just found that riding off-road with that taller windshield, every now and then you'd hit a bump and that lip of the windshield would shoot up and want to hit you in the face. And then one day, and then you can watch it in one of my older videos, I did shoot over the handlebars, and on my way over the handlebars I caught the front end of the windshield and just snapped it off. So now I've gone back to using the stock height windshield, and it's not as nice on a cold day. Doesn't keep as much wind off your chest, but I'm not really using this bike as a Goldwing these days, so the amount of highway I do, this windshield certainly makes it tolerable. Now we see my little brake reservoir. Now, I was always amazed by how many people were irritated by the fact that when you're riding, this vibrates. I would always read one of those threads on Adventure Rider or somewhere else, and I would think, next time I go riding, I'm going to see if this bobblehead actually bothers me, and to tell you the truth, I've never noticed it. So yes, you can buy all kinds of kits to stop this from wiggling and doing whatever. The wiggling doesn't seem to hurt it. It was obviously designed to do so. I don't have a fancy Touratech guard or a plastic guard to protect this. I've never heard of anybody damaging this thing. This bike has been flipped over, it's never been damaged, so I think some of those products are not all that useful, and I'm not convinced that having something on here that makes this solid, if I then did have a crash and something hit this, if this was solidly mounted, there's probably a better chance that this would get damaged. So not convinced that putting a guard on this actually does anything except make your wallet lighter. Now a few people have noticed that these are not the stock rotors. These are Galfer Wave rotors, and I didn't buy them because they're better than the stock rotors. I bought these because I have two sets of wheels. I have a 21-inch front tire, and I also have a 19-inch front, and I didn't want to have to switch the discs back and forth, so I went out to buy a second set of discs, and these were the cheapest ones I could find. Alright, here we see my Moto Overland toolbox and skid plate. Now, I've got quite a few of their products, and sadly they don't give them to me for free, but I just really like their stuff, and it's made in Canada. It's really nice quality, and as I've mentioned before, whenever you have a question, you contact these guys. They're just great. So I have the toolbox. It keeps some weight nice and low. This one uses a locking, this one has a key. It's not 100% waterproof. If you submerge this, you will get a little water in there, so don't put anything in there that can't survive a little moisture. And remember, when you come back from a ride where this has been submerged, to open it up and let the tools dry out so they don't get rusty. I keep all my tire changing stuff in here, so there's nothing really that worries about getting wet. And then the skid plate itself. Now the skid plate, as you can see, is compatible with the Adventure Spec bars, and I've done a little video on these Adventure Spec bars already, so you can take a look at that. And the nice thing about this skid plate is the mounting system is awesome. Once you've got it set up, taking this plate off and on literally takes a minute. The longest part is going to your toolbox to get the tools. And what I really like about this is that it's nice and thick. You can see how thick it is. It's taken a lot of abuse. I already destroyed the factory aluminum plate made by Touratech, and it's one of the only ones that I know of that goes all the way back underneath the catalytic. So it protects the entire engine and exhaust from front to back, wraps up nicely here around the side, and this one's been thoroughly tested, and when you take it off, it's not bent, goes on in a few seconds, and even has this custom cut M, which I can only assume is for Moto O'Reilly. Now anyone who's doing any research on the F800GS knows that the thing everybody complains about is the suspension. And yes, the suspension is not great. I had actually bought some BiTubo inserts to put in here, and they use a gas pressurized strut, and they lasted probably two small rides before they were useless. So I replaced them with the original struts that are in here, but I kept the heavy springs that came from BiTubo, and actually found that that combination works really well for me. So yes, you can spend thousands of dollars turning the front suspension of this bike into a thing of beauty, but if you just want to get it so that the bike's usable, go out and get some heavy-duty springs. A lot of companies make them. I've got the BiTubo ones in here, as I said, but I believe you've got a lot of choices depending on your weight. Touratech makes them, a whole bunch of guys make them. And in the back, I'm still using the stock rear shock, and it's still getting the job done. Now here we are, we've got the seat off, and if you look down here you can see the rear shock. This is your diagnostic plug so that the technicians can plug in to the computer and talk to your bike. And the weak link of the suspension, the real weak link, is under this plastic cover. You remove these 4 bolts, you take this cover off, and this is where the top mounting point for the rear shock is. And if you give your bike any sort of abuse, you will bend that bolt. There's a big long bolt under here. I'll try to find some footage of that from another video. And when that bolt bends, you can actually damage the frame of your bike. There's a guy on ADV Rider called Indy, I-N-D-Y, who makes a kit that solves the problem. The kit is cheap, it's easy to install. Any guy I know that has an F800, I almost insist that they go buy that kit and do this one mod. So if you're not going to do any other mods to your bike except fix the weak upper mount on the shock, spend your money on that. Now probably the first thing you should do if you're thinking of taking your F800 off-road is get some real tires. This is a MT21 front. I actually prefer the Dunlop D606, which kind of looks similar. You know, it is a knobby tire and you can see these knobs start to wear relatively quickly, but I would prefer to have one of these tires on and replace them more frequently than try to do any sort of real off-road riding with a 50/50 tire or something like a K60 from Heidenau or whatever. No, they just, if you want to go off-road, get some, you know, as close as you can to a full knobby and you'll be happy. So in the front, I like the 606. MT21 also nice. Here we see the back. This is also a D606. Now you may ask yourself, how is he running a 606 in the rear? It doesn't come in the right size for the F800. The F800, I think the stock rear size is a 150, so you could run a 140. Well, this rear rim was narrowed. I had this rear rim narrowed by Woody at Woody's Wheel Works, so now I can put a 130 series tire on it. These tires are cheaper, and I can use the D606, which I like. Well, before, when I didn't have the narrower rim, I actually used to love the Mitas E09 Dakar, and still a great tire, and in Canada anyways, they were quite cheap. So once again, if you're going to take this bike off-road, don't worry about spending tons of money on crash guards and Touratech bits. If you don't go out and buy some knobby tires, you're not going to have any fun. Well, I hope that answers some of your questions. I'm a little tired of listening to my own voice, and plus, when I look at that bike and I start thinking about all the aftermarket parts I've put on it, I start to get a little depressed. So if you have any questions about any of the parts or how to install them or anything at all, you can always drop us a line at info@apormc.com. If you like our videos, hit like, subscribe to our YouTube page, and you'll get notified of when new videos come out. And there's a link down below where you can head to our website, apormc.com, or our Facebook page, where we've actually been having a bit of fun with guys from all around the world. So thanks for watching.